Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. It is the Friday weekend edition. Penna Dexter in studio with me. And just a few minutes from now, we hopefully will see Kelly Shackelford. Traffic sometimes slows people down, but we will be talking quite a bit with him about some of the various cases that they have before the Supreme Court as well as in the federal courts. Of course, this is a week in which we've been talking about also the fact that Stephen Breyer, the justice, has stepped down and there will be a new Supreme Court justice. But just before I get into some of that, let me just at least have a shout out to our friends up in the New England area. I've lived in Connecticut and sometimes have gone to Boston when they had some snows, and they have some of these nor'easters, but they are now predicting that this may be the biggest snowstorm in the history of Boston. And so, again, for those of you up in the Boston area and in that general vicinity, we certainly be thinking about you and what you will be enduring over these next 24, 48 hours.
Yes, this can be kind of an unpredictable time of year. I mean, we expect cold weather, but a storm like this is crazy. We should be praying for our friends up there.
Thought I'd mention one other one real quickly, because we're going to spend a fair amount of time talking about the economy in just a minute. We'll be talking about the courts, but it was interesting that as the president was planning on addressing this issue of infrastructure, that we had a bridge actually collapse. Fortunately, no one was killed, but it injured 10 people. And a reminder that the infrastructure bill, we need to start really working on infrastructure. And of course, Tucker Carlson the other day sort of made fun of the fact that that $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill, it's going to be doubtful how much really goes to what you and I would call infrastructure.
Well, that's the thing with these bills. It's such a great word. It's such a positive in people's minds. And we do need infrastructure. But, you know, I've always said that as much infrastructure that you can do at the state level with corporate money is it's the way to go. And right now, you know, we seem to look to the federal government for everything. So, that's sort of a healthy skepticism, I think, to say how much is really going to go to infrastructure. We do need to make sure that if it's labeled that way and the taxpayers are thinking it is, that it actually goes that direction.
Well, again, let's get to the economy. I know there are some things that we can be talking about. And then, of course, when Kelly joins us, we will be talking about the Navy SEALs case that has now been amended to be a class action case. Melissa Klein, we've been talking about her. And
we've been talking about her for like almost 10 years
I know.
now.
And Coach Joe Kennedy, that one's going to the Supreme Court. You already have one right now in terms of school choice that's there from Maine. Also, for those of you that are actually letter carriers, and of course, so many, and of course, the retirement of Justice Breyer. But I know that you have some things in front of you here on the economy. I thought it might be worth mentioning that, since once we get into talking about judicial issues, we may never return to some of these topics.
Well, it's good to talk about the economy. I mean, you're seeing sort of mixed news. You're seeing positive news for 2021. In that year, GDP expanded 5.7%, and the U.S. economy grew rapidly that year, especially even in the fourth quarter, advancing to a 6.9% annual growth rate. That's pretty strong growth. And this was the strongest year of growth in nearly 4 decades. Of course, we've got the caveat, the pandemic-induced recession. So the Wall Street Journal just asked the question in today's journal in the editorial page, what about the economy that might have been? What if the economy, which was ready to go,
I saw that.
What if that had been allowed to take off on its own? But instead, of course, there was last March, almost a year ago, injected $1.2 trillion stimulus. And then, of course, there was the quote unquote infrastructure bill that passed later in the year. So, we're seeing this creeping inflation now. It's actually skyrocketing, which could be very dangerous for the economy. And you kind of wonder if we had just let things grow as they were already doing rather than trying to inject all the stimulus in the economy. Would we have all the supply chain problems right now? Would we have just the problems with inflation and the problems with just being able to buy what we were used to buying and getting what we wanted and not waiting weeks and months for it?
I thought that article in Wall Street Journal kind of parallels what Representative Kevin Brady, who's been on the program with us before. He's kind of the ranking Republican on the House Ways and Means Committee, and he was using these same kind of arguments the other day, in which they, for example, reminded us that President Joe Biden, when he had that press conference, talked about the fact that we created 6 million new jobs. And anytime we create a new job, good idea. But he also pointed out that even so, the Congressional Budget Office went back and projected that we might have created that many jobs if we didn't do anything. And then the other one, which we'll talk about, is the issue of unemployment, because I thought it was really interesting that, yes, the unemployment rate has dropped 3.9%, but you would still get the sense that we need to actually get some more people in some of the jobs because we see so many job vacancies and a depressed labor market. So he was just kind of working his way through some of these arguments that are used to actually pat anybody on the back. And I don't care if you're a Republican president or Democratic president, they always take credit for all the successes in the economy. And oftentimes run away from any of the failures. But I thought one more real quickly before we go to a break was the fact that you look at the fact that, again, President Biden talked about working people got a raise. And it is true. They did receive wages that rose about 4.7%. But if you assume the inflation rate is 7%, and anybody listening to this program knows that I'm convinced that it's closer to 15%, then yes, we did something, but we didn't do a great deal. So again, economic factors, we'll always be talking about that. I have always said, and will continue to say, that sometimes presidents take too much credit for when the economy is good and receive too much blame when it actually goes south. Some of the things are affected by presidential actions and by the administration, but a lot of it has nothing to do with whether or not you have a president who's a Republican or a Democrat in the Oval Office. And I think it's kind of interesting to see some of those numbers. And again, kudos to the Wall Street Journal. What would have happened if we didn't do anything?
I think it's a great question. We need to kind of mull on that and chew on it a little bit as we move into a time when, first of all, the Fed's going to be tightening, and second of all, Joe Biden still wants to cut up, build back better, and pass it in pieces now. So, we always need to be on guard against government spending, and I think now is probably an important time to do that.
Well, let's take a break. When we come back, we now have Kelly Shackelford with us, and we'll talk about all of these cases. Navy SEALs, a little broader now, a class action case. We've been thinking about Melissa Klein for all those years, the Oregon Baker. Of course, we have Justice Breyer's retirement. I want to get some of his comments there. And just following along on these two Supreme Court cases, one is Coach Joe Kennedy, and the other one, of course, is the very important case out of Maine, which I think could really affect the issue of school choice. And for those of you that carry letters, I think we have some comments there. I don't know if we're going to have enough time just for all of Kelly's cases, but we will talk about that. Let me mention
I'm glad
later
Kelly's
on.
Back.
Yeah, I'm glad he's here. But we also do have some other articles. One on that leaked video. We talked about that the other day, the clandestine migrant immigration, where they're loading them on planes. Probably get to that in our second hour. And then also what's happened in the election. I know some of you might say, well, we're not even close to a primary. Well, we are here because Monday is the last day that you can register to vote in the state of Texas, and early voting in Texas starts on Valentine's Day on the 14th. So if some of you say, hey, we're not going to have our primary till May or June or July or August, well, we already have one primary coming up right here in the state of Texas. So we'll talk about all that right after these important messages.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Many religious leaders from various denominations have spoken out against what could be called woke theology. Earlier this month, Archbishop Jose Gomez added his concern. As the leader of the Archdiocese in Los Angeles, he wanted to step forward to educate others. He's concerned that the space that the church and believing Christians are permitted to occupy is shrinking due to wokeism. He has noticed how church institutions and Christian-owned businesses are increasingly challenged and harassed. He added that it is also true in so many other sectors like education, healthcare, and government. The woke religion, he says, rejects the salvation of Christ for the salvation found in racial tension and class struggle. He laments that these ideas have not only overtaken the universities, corporations, and the media, but are also found within Catholic and Protestant churches. He also explains that woke faith is incompatible with Christian faith for so many reasons. First, it is atheistic and denies God and Christ. Second, it replaces biblical sin and salvation with a false view of salvation through racial struggle and constant warfare. Third, it is a utopian vision that believes we can somehow create a heaven on earth without Christ. Woke theology is seductive because we do see injustice and inequality in our fallen world. But we do not need to employ a Marxist worldview and secular tools to address real social problems in our society. Many of the successful social movements in the last 2 centuries, like abolition, suffrage, and civil rights, rested on a biblical foundation. We don't need woke theology to bring salt and light to our fallen world. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Go deeper on topics like you just heard by visiting pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, it is our weekend edition. Penna Dexter and now Kelly Shackelford has been able to join us. You will see that the first 2 articles, and those have links to many other articles, all go to First Liberty. And then we have one about Justice Breyer's retirement we'll get to as well. But Penna, I thought many of us remember how long ago Melissa Klein, the baker in Oregon, has been involved in some kind of court case. And now we have some news. Isn't great news, but is better than what we've been able to report.
Melissa Klein, she's very talented at creating beautiful cakes and baked goods. And, of course, she had this bakery called Sweet Cakes. It was really a family business. And I've loved the story because she expressed early on, and she continues to talk about how it was so special to her to do wedding cakes. People would come in, they'd tell her the story. She'd create a cake that was from her artist's heart and talent that would fit that wedding. And so this one customer, who was already a customer, of course, came in, and she was part of a same-sex couple, 2 females about to have their union. And Melissa was a strong Christian, and she and her husband, Aaron, and she couldn't do that. I mean, because it's art that comes from her heart, and her faith is strong. She could not, like so many others, like Jack Phillips and Masterpiece Bakery, they couldn't do it. Well, Oregon is a very special place, Kerby. I know that you went to school there and all of that, but they are so far to the left, and they have this administrative bureaucratic agency called the Bureau of Labor and Industries, and they were just draconian when this was reported. And they went after Melissa and Aaron Klein. They ended up finding them $135,000. these people ended up having people picketing and boycotting and threatening. They really lost the business. But they've been staying in the fight because they don't believe they should be forced to create a product, a cake, that violates their religious liberty. And the case, I think it's been going on since 2013. So that's almost 10 years now.
It's amazing.
And so it went up to the Supreme Court. They sent it back down to the Oregon courts because of the Masterpiece case to say, okay, in light of that, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to let Kelly tell everybody what they did do, because there's some positives in there, but it's fairly disappointing.
Yeah, $135,000 fine that bankrupted their business. They were going to pass this business on to their children. By the way, one of the things that a lot of people don't remember is when they did this, when Melissa said, "Oh, I'm sorry, because of my faith, I can't do this," it was not even legal for a same-sex couple to be married in Oregon.
Right, they didn't have same-sex marriage.
So think about this. It wasn't even legal to do. Melissa said, I do these cakes out of my faith and all that. I can't do that. They still fined him $135,000. It seems like they need to fine themselves back then, right, if that was a problem. But anyway, this is clear religious discrimination. You cannot punish people because the government has a position that they think is better than the religious beliefs of people. People have a right to follow their faith in these things. And so free speech, you can't force people to express art or express things they want to. So it violates numerous things. Plus, by the way, the prosecutor was also the judge in this case. That's how it works in their system. Wonderful system, huh? And the prosecutor, before they even got into court, said just the most outrageous things in public. Obviously, you're not going to get any due process here. So it goes. We take this to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court unanimously sent it back down, vacated it, and said, "Why don't you try again? This time, why don't you look at Masterpiece?" They sat on this in Oregon for 2 years, and now they issue a decision, and the decision says, well, we've got to admit that there is bigotry and prejudice below, and therefore we're going to remove the fine for now, but we're going to uphold our ability to punish them because they're Christians, and we're going to send it down to the same agency to have them redo the damages to be assessed against her. So it's just unbelievable. It's like they realize the Supreme Court is telling them you can't do this, but they're still trying to figure out a way to do it. And what's horrible, and Penna, I think, did a great job with this, and poor Melissa, this is 10 years they've been going through this, and it's almost like starting all over. So we're appealing. This is outrageous. It's a violation of the First Amendment and the Kleins. The reason they're really doing this, it's not just because of what was done to them. It's because they know that millions and millions of people are at jeopardy in what they can do with their business. And they know that this might be the case that finally stops all of these type of things where the government thinks it can come in and tell you that you can't run your business according to your faith. So a very important case, a slight victory, but really we're not done. We're going to appeal this for sure.
I just mentioned that we do have that Melissa Klein recipe for success. And first of all, it gives you the little bit of the history. But Penna, this might be a prayer target for our listeners to encourage people to pray for, isn't it, Aaron and Melissa Klein?
Yes.
And those are the individuals that have suffered so much. And if nothing else, maybe send up a prayer for them today. We're going to be giving you lots of prayer targets, by the way, but that's the first one I want to mention.
They're bold, they're brave. And, this Bureau of Labor and Industries, BOLI, I guess is the acronym for it. Mm-hmm. The same agency is going to be reconsidering this. And, it just, when you read the case and you read the story, you realize what an attitude these people have. I mean, it's just crazy.
It sounds like something they would do in a communist country.
Yes, it
does. They would say, oh, yeah, we see that they said a lot of prejudiced things. So we're going to wipe that off, but we're going to send it back to the same people. And now maybe they can be prejudiced without telling you that they're prejudiced.
So, Kelly, does it go through the state court system again, and then you can maybe move it to the federal courts?
This was the Court of Appeals. So the next step would be the Oregon Supreme Court and then the U.S. Supreme Court. And this took 2 years. So they were clearly stalling. It doesn't take 2 years to do this. And then finding a way to rule. The court sent a strong message to the Supreme Court. So they were trying to not sort of flaunt the Supreme Court, but yet still, keep everything the same, which is what they've done. But we're not, they don't have to go back through this. We're going up on appeal. We're saying you should not be subjected to this again.
So it'll be speedier, you're hoping?
I think it'll be speedy once we get to the U.S. Supreme Court, but I don't know what the Oregon court will do. Hopefully they'll have more professionalism than what we saw here.
Yes.
Pray for the Kleins. They've been through a lot. Aaron has had to take all kinds of odd jobs and different things, and they have really suffered these years because of this. So pray for Aaron and Melissa.
And again, all that's at First Liberty, and you can see some pictures of her smiling. One picture where she's obviously crying, and a couple of others. And I once a year go and speak in a Bible Institute in Oregon, and one of the conversations we've had, especially in the second year students, is: are there positions, are there jobs that as a Christian you probably can't take? You can't probably be a baker in Oregon. You probably can't be a photographer in Oregon. You probably can't be a wedding planner in Oregon. You start going down that list, because if indeed the state has such a animus towards anybody that would stray at all from their particular ideas, you can see that they're starting to say, Kelly, maybe we can't, unless there's First Liberty get some victories here, certain professions Christians can't even go into.
Well, and that's what we're going to make sure that it stops in this country. You have a First Amendment right to express the art you want to express. The government has no right to tell you have to say something you don't agree with. You have a right to run your business according with your faith. This is ridiculous, because it's not that Aaron and Melissa wouldn't serve these people. They would.
They had.
Yeah.
They were already customers.
So that's what people get mixed up about. Oh, you got to serve everybody. Well, they serve everybody. But that doesn't mean that you have to express every message someone wants you to express. And I think most Americans, the vast amount of Americans, realize that. If they came in and said we wanted a cake with all kinds of, foul language and things, if somebody said no, or something, some images that were pornographic or something, everybody knows you can say no. That's what this is. You cannot force somebody to say something that they don't want to say. They served everybody. They loved these people, and they served them. It's just when they said, oh, now you have to express a message that you disagree with, that there was a problem.
More problems come out of Oregon, because isn't the Smith decision out of Oregon too? So, so you just start thinking a lot of it gets back to the issue of free speech and religious freedom and all the rest. But anyway, we need to take a break. We come back. Kelly, we've talked about the Navy SEALs case, but you've got some new additional material, yes, which if you are necessarily working right now in the military, you'll be encouraged by that. And if you have a friend, family member, someone that's in the Navy, this, I think, is something you want to know about. And of course, we have a couple of cases before the Supreme Court, and not to mention the fact one of the articles here has to do with, well, what about Justice Breyer and who's going to replace him? We have a lot to cover, and we will do that right after these important messages.
We live in a digital generation. Point of View is reaching this often overly plugged-in generation with truth. You can keep up with us 24 hours a day using your phone, your tablet, your laptop, or your desktop. Search for the Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, where you can keep up with today's issues, learn about current and upcoming guests by liking us on Facebook. Also, follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @PointOfViewRTS. That stands for Point of View Radio Talk Show. Learn, interact, make a difference with Point of View using new media. And here's one way you can make a big difference. Help us increase our reach by spreading the word among your friends. Share a Facebook post. Tag us in a tweet. With enough joining us to plant seeds, we'll see a tremendous harvest. Come on, it only takes a minute. Search for Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, @PointOfViewRTS on Twitter, and subscribe to the Point of View Radio Talk Show channel on YouTube. Learn, interact, share. The Point of View Radio Talk Show. Point of View will continue after this.
You're listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
If you go to our website, you notice that quite a number of the articles today have to do with First Liberty or have to do with the Supreme Court, and that's because it's been that kind of week. But we will also, in the next hour, get into some other topics. Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford with us, and Penna, the Navy SEALs case has an interesting turn, and I thought it'd be good to focus on that for a few minutes.
I think it's a positive turn. First of all, there was a decision out of the Northern District of Texas who issued a preliminary injunction against the Department of Defense because they were punishing the SEALs and the Naval Special Warfare personnel because of their objections to the vaccine mandate. And you know, the way this was basically reported, the way this was being enforced was draconian, even to the point of if you're a SEAL and you don't get the vaccine, you're going to be charged for all the training expenses from you training to be a Navy SEAL if you won't get the vaccine. I mean, it was just unbelievable. These people that protect us and devote their lives and take risks every day, but don't want the vaccine. Maybe they've already had COVID, number one. And number two, even if they haven't, they do not want the vaccine. And there are a lot of good reasons not to get it. Well, so they got this victory, preliminary injunction. And so they've expanded, First Liberty and the SEALs have expanded it now to all Navy, all service members in the Navy who requested a religious accommodation from the vaccine mandate. And so that's where it's going now, and I think it's a great opportunity.
Sure. And they were just routinely rejecting them because they had to go through the steps. Explain that if you might, because that's really interesting.
And this is why we expanded it, is we brought this suit on behalf of these 35 Navy SEALs, and these are the best of the best. I mean, the idea that we want to kick them out is just nuts, much less bully them, harass them, threaten them because they ask for something that is their right to ask for under law. It's specifically laid out for them. If you ask for a religious accommodation, they are required, this is in the law, to look and see if they can do that. And instead, what's happened is of tens of thousands across the military, they're all getting the same form letter, and the thing that was exposed in ours is, of course, Navy SEALs are part of the Navy. And we actually discovered some evidence that we got into the trial before the judge that showed that there were like 50 steps before, and it was just a total sham. And once that evidence
So they wouldn't even look at it for 50 steps.
For 50 steps, you're all assumed to know is the answer before they even look at the person. And it was clearly a sham. It was just a big sham. And so the judge said in his order, this is, quote, theater. Their process was just, quote, theater. And so since this is not something that they did just for the Navy SEALs, but this is for all, that's why we converted this into a class action, because now it will protect every person in the Navy. And then hopefully, they have now appealed this, by the way, to the Federal Court of Appeals. Hopefully, we will not only expand this to everybody in the Navy, but we will set a pretty high-level precedent which will affect everybody in the military. It's really outrageous. I mean, Jerry Boykin, General Boykin said it best. I mean, I was talking to him, and he said, this is going to destroy our military. You don't force people to do things. No commander, and of course that's the case here. None of these commanders were telling them, hey, we're coming from the Biden administration. And as Boykin said, he said, look, this is how you lose your military, because they don't trust. And sure enough, there was evidence already coming out. I've seen it all over the country of people telling their children not to go into the military. I mean, they're in the process of trying to destroy our military with this. And again, General Boykin, I have the highest respect for. He turned to me and he said, your case might save our military. So that's how important this case is. We have tens of thousands of military families that are in really a terrorizing situation right now. their pensions that they've worked for 18, 19 years about to be taken away, them to be told they're not going to get an honorable discharge, which means it would have banned them from a number of different employments, being threatened like the SEALs with taking their trident away from them. I mean, just all kinds of things that are going on that are just really disgusting. And so hopefully we'll get a win here and stop all this before any more damage is done really to our military and our national security, because these are the best of the best that we're representing. And hopefully this injunction, which we now have, will apply to everybody in the military eventually.
You know, if you think of the movie Hacksaw Ridge, Desmond Doss, isn't that
Yes.
an example of a conscientious objection and an individual that was willing to be shot at and not carry a rifle? And that was World War II. And now, if you don't get a shot, we're going to drum you out of the Corps almost instantaneously.
No, it's a great example, and it's what people forget. We value people having different beliefs in this country. It's part of why we formed this country, and it's actually very valuable. As Desmond Doss showed, there's 70 individuals that had their lives saved because he had different beliefs, and he actually so valued life that he wouldn't carry a weapon, which they tried to court-martial him for. But God bless this country, court-martial didn't work because we don't do that in this country. They said he has a right to religious freedom. He can still be a medic. He doesn't have to carry a weapon. And the result was him crawling under the enemy over and over, risking his own life because he so valued the sanctity of life that he saved 70 other people. And that's why we don't just say, oh, I'm sorry, there's we don't care what your religion is. No, we have laws, federal laws that say you do have to look at that and see if you can accommodate. And they're just flaunting the law here. It's really a purge of people with conscience, with convictions, with objections. That's the last thing that we need to do.
And, I think because of all these social engineering things that happen in the military happen for a reason, because the military is not a democracy. They don't get to decide what they do. They have to follow orders. And, that's why it works. And so they try these things, these ideas, and they've been so successful with many of the agendas for social engineering in the military. The left has in really infiltrating. And so, but on religious liberty, the military has always had chaplains and religious freedom. And now they're saying this is a bad thing if you're religious, and they're exposing people because these objections are out there. And I think that if the military had caved, if the military does cave, but first of all, if the Navy SEALs had caved, now the Navy, if they caved, then I think it says a lot for what would happen to the whole society with regard to these mandates and then other things that the government can come in and make you do. It's
a really important case. And look, these SEALs, they said, hey, look, we'll do anything else. We'll wear a mask. We'll do any of the other stuff. And so there's no reason for this. I mean, these are Navy SEALs, right? You could probably inject them with a vial of something, and within an hour it would be dead in their bodies. I mean, these are the most fit, strong, and capable. And again,
especially now with Omicron.
Yeah. And most of these guys had already had it, Delta or one of the others already. They had immunity, which, oh, by the way, the articles are now showing, all the evidence is showing that it's like 4 times better than having a vaccine. So it's incredible that this is going on. I mean, this just shows that this is not about having our best serve us. These guys that we represented, just the SEALs, 350 years of combat service, and these are the very top echelon. Let's take them off the field. It's nuts. Why? Because of what? There's no rationale for this. And again, they granted thousands of exemptions for administrative reasons or medical reasons. They granted zero religious exemptions. That shows really all you need to see as far as what's going on.
Well, again, some of those articles you can find there at firstliberty.org. Also, Mike Berry did a very good piece on that at firstlibertylive.com in case you need to find that particular piece. We come back, let's talk about the Supreme Court. Obviously, we are going to have a new Supreme Court justice sometime in the future, but we also have two cases. A couple of weeks ago, you might remember when we first heard about Coach Kennedy, we said, oh, maybe they'll decide that in the fall. And then we found out, no, they're actually putting together material, and we may know that one as well as this one that involves school choice out of Maine. So some very important cases before the Supreme Court. And of course, I'd love to get Kelly's comments as well. And we have one of the articles here about Justice Breyer's retirement and some of the reaction there as well. So as we take a break, if you'd like to join us, at one point, feel free to give us a call, 800-351-1212. If not, sit back and listen to some of the comments around the roundtable here for Weekend Edition. We'll be right back.
Palo Alto, California is a wealthy city of 68,500, south of San Francisco and at the north end of Silicon Valley. It's home to Stanford University, so I guess you could say the city is filled with successful people, high achievers. Parents there are not anxious for their children to return to online classrooms, even as the Omicron variant surges. Neither are their kids, and neither are school officials, although 170 teachers were out sick last week district-wide. When the winter break ended, schools across the nation were faced with decisions regarding what to do as COVID spreads again. The Wall Street Journal reports that Palo Alto School Superintendent Don Austin received an interesting text on a Saturday from his deputy. It read, "What would you think about soliciting parent volunteers to keep us afloat?" Superintendent Austin said it was like a light bulb went off. Mr. Austin sent out a video message to parents comparing Palo Alto to the town of Bedford Falls from the movie It's a Wonderful Life. He told them George Bailey needed the help of the entire community to help him to survive, and they did, epically. Mr. Austin issued a call to action. More than 700 parents across the district's 18 schools responded. They signed up to work shifts as custodians, food service workers, substitute assistants, and COVID testing aides. The jobs they're doing don't require any certificates or background checks. Many of the parents are currently working from home on flexible schedules. Feng Shui is a software engineer at Google who signed up for hour-long shifts wiping lunch tables. He said he liked having his two daughters home during the first year of the pandemic, but according to the Journal, he knew it was better for them to be in school. Online learning is a valuable tool, but even parents in this community filled with successful techies are willing to step up to keep their children learning in person. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, let's focus our time and attention now on the Supreme Court for a while. First of all, Kelly, it is amazing how many really important cases are going to come down in just a couple of months, because we've talked about the abortion case many times. I mentioned in passing the affirmative action case. We've talked with you about, of course, the issue of school choice. I've mentioned once on the Second Amendment case. And then, of course, we have this one with Coach Kennedy. I mean, goodness, every single day there's going to be a significant announcement, and most of them will come in June, won't they?
Yeah, latter couple of weeks of June, are going to be crazy with the big cases. You know, we've got Roe v. Wade basically being overturned or not, right? We've got the Second Amendment. We've got this school choice case, which is going to have a huge impact that we argued in December. We now have the affirmative action case with regard to Harvard and all of them.
Yes, right.
But it'll affect the whole country. And Coach Kennedy. Now, you know, and there's a few I'm not even thinking of right now. I mean, it's going to be crazy, all these things coming down at one time. And this is right before the midterm elections, right? So
right.
Really, and it'll be right before the confirmation hearing.
Likely,
of the next justice, because you know, Breyer is going to step down at the end of the term. That would be at the end of June, and then they would have to start the process. So I mean,
they can't start anything beforehand, because you hear Biden saying he's making his nomination like next month.
But then they have to, once he makes the nomination, they have to go and you know, see the senators and build their case and all that. But he won't be replaced certainly until after he steps down, which is at the end of the term. So they won't be able to replace him specifically until then. But you know, this is a lot of stuff. Now, the Coach Kennedy case, I think a lot of people know that case. They know what it is. Coach has been fighting this for almost 7 years. He's finally going to get his time in the Supreme Court, and I feel really good about it. But I think there's so many big things about this case. They're number one, and for those who don't know, it's a coach who went to a knee by himself after the game to say a 15, 20-second silent prayer, thanking God for the privilege of coaching the young men, and he was fired for that. And he was told if he went to a knee, he would be fired. And he went to a knee because number one, he was a Marine for 20 years. And number two, he was like, what kind of example am I for the kids? And so for 7 years, he hasn't been able to coach those kids. And which just breaks his heart because he loves it. And so everybody, the story is powerful and it's important on that. But it goes much further than that. There has never been a case at the Supreme Court involving the rights, religious freedoms rights of teachers, coaches, or school employees. I mean, there's never been. This is going to be the first precedent. So that's really huge when it comes to religious freedom. Number two, I think this is everybody's going to see this case because everybody gets it, and so the media will cover it a lot. I really feel I felt from the very beginning of this case that this was God saying, I'm going to hold a model or example up to ask you a question. In the culture you're in right now, are you willing to take a knee if it means it'll cost you? Because that's what Coach Kennedy did. I really think it's somewhat of a challenge to everybody who's of faith, because we get all kinds of opportunities right now of whether we're going to be open about our faith, whether we're going to be obedient, even if it costs us. And I think this is the model case. This is sort of a message from the Lord. Are you willing to take a knee? And so I think it's powerful in that way, but it's also powerful in that the arguments that were made, I don't want to get too technical, but it gets into the rights of people who work for the government and whether once they start working for the government, they don't have any free speech anymore. Yeah. And of course, that's not the law that you don't have any free speech. And so this case is going to really determine not only for coaches and teachers but every single person who works for the government. If what they said below is correct at the Ninth Circuit, then if you ever do anything religious while you're working and somebody can see you, you violated the Constitution and they can fire you. So this is a really extreme, ruling. And so it's going to give the opportunity. There's going to be writing on the fact that, hey, look, when you become an employee, there's some control over you as a government employee, but you have free speech rights up to this point. You have religious freedom rights up to this point. So it's going to go even further than the schools. So it's going to be big in a lot of ways, I think.
I think the question is, you're very optimistic about the eventual outcome, but what if it was not? What if his right was not upheld? What would that mean?
Yeah, it would be a disaster because it would be like the Ninth Circuit ruling, which is the Ninth Circuit ruling was that if anybody who works for the government ever does anything religious and people can see them, then they're going to assume that the government is pushing religion, and that violates the Establishment Clause. And therefore, we can ban every person who works for the government to ever do anything religious. You can't wear a cross. You can't bow over your meal. You can never talk about your faith. You can never do any of these things. I mean, it would be just a huge body blow to the First Amendment. But that's what the Ninth Circuit said. Now, that's why.
So we would either have not very many people of faith in government or schools or teaching kids or what. We would either have that or we would just have people having to hide their faith.
Yeah, it'd be like they're in a communist country and they're having to be Christians underground.
So you're really stripping religion out of the culture.
Yes. And that's why there were 11 dissenters in the Ninth Circuit. And that's why the conservative justices earlier said, if this is troubling what you're doing, then when the first opinion went up and they said, if this comes back like this, we're going to have to look at this. Well, since then, they added Amy Coney Barrett. So there's now even more. And they took it. I mean, they took it fast.
Yes, they did.
That's one of the reasons why it's a little shocking that it's this term. We thought it would be next term if they took it.
So did I. Yeah.
But we're going to be it looks like we'll be arguing this in April, and this will come out in June. So this is a really important decision for the country, and it's one that I think people have been following. Even President Trump has tweeted before he was kicked off. He tweeted about it twice. There's very few people. Bobby Bowden spoke out about this before he passed away. So you got big football. In fact, there's going to be a brief filed in support of our case by a number of pro football and coaches and players and who everybody knows, because you can't do this to people. Coach Kennedy went to a knee by himself, said a silent prayer to thank the Lord for the privilege of coaching those young men. If those are the coaches we're trying to get rid of, we have got serious problems. Those are the coaches we want. Those are the coaches people hope they have, no matter what their faith, that somebody so cares about the kids that they are thanking God for the privilege of being able to coach them and build into their lives.
Again, another prayer target, and not only the fact that it might actually give him a job back, but it might actually begin to re-energize this idea of free exercise. Because if you look at the First Amendment, it also talks about the establishment of religion, but the free exercise. Yep. And you've talked about before how that could change that. I think before it's all through, when they write the history of religious freedom, they're going to be using at least footnotes to First Liberty because of some of their key cases. But we need to take a break.
2021 is a key year.
I would say so. Oh, if you think we're done, we're really not even close, because I do want to talk a little bit about Justice Stephen Breyer and the way they treated him or mistreated him. And also, what are the possible candidates, especially when you already on the front end say it has to be a black woman? And what about that? Affirmative action, all sorts of other issues. We'll cover that in the next hour, right after this.
Having civil conversations about important issues seems to be harder and harder. Various media outlets tell people what they should believe, why they should be outraged, and getting people to actually think, well, it can be difficult. Whether it's the gospel, tax issues, social policy, or just about anything else, you need to have solid information and clear thinking to address the hard issues. You need God's truth applied. And that's what you get in less than 2 minutes with Point of View's Viewpoints Commentary, a daily resource to help you be informed and think through the things we need to be talking about. It is free and will arrive in your inbox each day when you visit pointofview.net/signup. Sometimes we know we should say something, but we're silent because we're not quite sure what to say. Viewpoints Commentary can help you break the silence and change the narrative. It can make you a more equipped agent for truth. Get your free subscription to the Viewpoints Commentary at pointofview.net/signup. Pointofview.net/signup. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour, if you'd like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Had one caller from New Mexico saying thank you to First Liberty for what they are doing, and God bless what we are doing and talking about here. Just thought I'd mention that real quickly. One of the booklets we've sent out recently is a biblical point of view on church state. And Penna, we don't even claim to be lawyers around here, but we can't let First Liberty have all the fun. So again, there is both the idea of the establishment religion and free exercise. And I think this Coach Kennedy case gets us into that issue, doesn't it?
It does. And as a matter of fact, it sort of gives us hope with regard to the free exercise clause, because the justices, some of the conservative justices like Alito, said, you know, we haven't had that kind of an argument and we're waiting for one when they sent the Kennedy case back down. So, Kelly, it looks like perhaps they want to see certain types of arguments, and I know that you've been going that direction.
Yeah, there are a number of things they kind of highlighted in that statement that was attached to the cert denial a few years ago. They also highlighted that they were ready to hear reconsider a major case that the Supreme Court had issued years ago that was really bad, where they interpreted I don't want to get too technical, but basically it's about religion in the workplace. And under federal law, if you have 16 or more employees, you have to not only not discriminate against people based on their religion, but you have to affirmatively accommodate them if they have a religious problem with something, and you can do so. So most common thing is, let's say you're a Seventh-day Adventist, or let's say you're an Orthodox Jew and you have a Sabbath from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday. Well, can you juggle the schedule? If you can, then you can't fire somebody because they can't work that day if you can juggle schedules and make it work. And that's a typical. Well, the court a number of years ago gave a really the way the law says is you have a right to a reasonable accommodation as long as the company can do so without causing an undue hardship. And so what's that? Right? Well, if it costs them money, you would think, okay, I understand that. But they interpreted undue hardship as basically anything. And so the court kind of sent out the signal that they're ready to redo that in a way that really is appropriate.
Very
so
good.
There are a lot of sort of religious liberty things now that are on the table that are very positive. And when we won the Bladensburg Cross case, that was an important case for the Establishment Clause because we're not going to tear down all the religious symbols and all this kind of things. So it was a really important win, and they took the Lemon case that had been around for 50 years, and they really put it in the corner and said, no, we're not doing this anymore, this hostility of religion. But Coach Kennedy's is a free exercise case, right? It's not about a monument or whatever. It's about a person trying to exercise his religion. And so those are rare. And Jack Phillips was a case like that, although they didn't kind of get to the merits on that one. This one, they're going to, I think, hit head on. And so it's going to be a real, and I love cases that not only are, going to hit the big issues, but that are simple, easy to understand, that the country can understand. And they do. And when they see this case, the country's with Coach Kennedy. And I think this is what we need more. We need more people like this kind of coach, and less like what we're seeing a lot the ones that are using foul language or losing control or what. And those guys don't get fired, but we're going to fire the guy who goes to a knee because he so appreciates being able to build into these young guys' lives.
If you broaden it out to the culture right now, we're going through this wokeness and this cancel culture, and people are operating in fear, which is, those perpetrating it on academia and on the rest of the culture, that's what they want. They want to engender fear.
Yeah.
And so I think when you have someone like like Melissa Klein, but like Coach Kennedy, these people who are willing to step out and, just practice their faith, not violate their faith. Coach Kennedy is just so bold. For him, he didn't have to do that. He can go pray by himself. He doesn't have to go out and be public about it. And he was going to lose his job, and he did it anyway. He was bold enough to say, I care about the kids, and I don't want to disappoint them after I've been doing this all this time.
Yeah, 7 years.
I'm not going to pull back and go cower under, in a bathroom and pray or something like that. So, these kind of people are inspirational, and we need that now.
Yeah. Really what they're trying to do, think if they were successful, prayer would be the new pornography, prayer in public.
Mm-hmm.
How backwards is that? Pornography is okay, but prayer, that's the one thing we can't allow. And why? Because he might influence somebody. Somebody might see him in the stands and think, maybe I should pray.
Yeah.
Or maybe I should check out this God. Well, you can't have that in this country.
Yeah, that's right. Well, let's get to the Supreme Court because I've been waiting to hear Kelly Shackelford talk about this. Stephen Breyer, of course, part of the liberal wing, although occasionally it doesn't always vote in lockstep with the liberals, most of the time. There are reports that he was surprised, disappointed, even blindsided by the fact that he wanted to maybe retire this summer, which is when those announcements come. But somehow it was leaked to the press. What about that?
It's kind of par for the course of what you see with this group. This group, Demand Justice, is been parking outside the court with a big sign saying, Justice Breyer needs to resign or step down or retire and all this. They've been trying to bully him for 2 years to step down. And the fact that he had decided he was going to do so and somebody decided to, again, sort of bully him by going out with the information before he could, it's just par for the course of the kind of things that are going on right now. Gosh, I'd have been tempted if I were him to say I changed my mind. In light of that.
We talked about that yesterday, whether he might want to do that.
But what's going on, let's be honest, what's going on. The Senate is currently 50-50, and the vice president breaks the tie. They are scared, rightly so, that they might not have the Senate after November. And if they don't have the Senate, then the Senate's the one who confirms the Supreme Court justices. So Breyer might have waited another year or two, but he knew he couldn't. If he wanted to give a chance for a Democrat to replace him, then he had to do it now. And I think there's no doubt that's why the timing of this being done this year after the term is over. And so I think the sad thing is that we have a president who has publicly said he's going to pick a black woman before he even knows who. That's really degrading to that person. Nobody's going to think that he picked the best person now, even if it is the best person. And, it's why we don't do segregation and race quotas and things like that. It's not helpful overall, but it's certainly horrible for that person. Everybody else will look and say, well, I get here on my merits, but I guess one didn't. That's sad. You shouldn't do that.
Let's take a break. We'll continue our conversation right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Many religious leaders from various denominations have spoken out against what could be called woke theology. Earlier this month, Archbishop Jose Gomez added his concern. As the leader of the Archdiocese in Los Angeles, he wanted to step forward to educate others. He's concerned that the space that the church and believing Christians are permitted to occupy is shrinking due to wokeism. He has noticed how church institutions and Christian-owned businesses are increasingly challenged and harassed. He added that it is also true in so many other sectors like education, healthcare, and government. The woke religion, he says, rejects the salvation of Christ for the salvation found in racial tension and class struggle. He laments that these ideas have not only overtaken the universities, corporations, and the media, but are also found within Catholic and Protestant churches. He also explains that woke faith is incompatible with Christian faith for so many reasons. First, it is atheistic and denies God and Christ. Second, it replaces biblical sin and salvation with a false view of salvation through racial struggle and constant warfare. Third, it is a utopian vision that believes we can somehow create a heaven on earth without Christ. Woke theology is seductive because we do see injustice and inequality in our fallen world. But we do not need to employ a Marxist worldview and secular tools to address real social problems in our society. Many of the successful social movements in the last 2 centuries, like abolition, suffrage, and civil rights, rested on a biblical foundation. We don't need woke theology to bring salt and light to our fallen world. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Go deeper on topics like you just heard by visiting pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, we'll spend just a little bit longer talking about the Supreme Court and then go on to some other issues. But one I thought I would put on the table is yesterday we talked about Ketanji Brown Jackson. Now, is she the odds-on favorite? Everybody seems to think so. She's on the D.C. Circuit Court. I've said that's kind of like the farm club, if you will, or the farm team for the Supreme Court. It's actually where Brett Kavanaugh came from. And back to these votes, I mean, when she was put on that court, you had 3 Republican senators, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Lindsey Graham. Now, if you only need 51, by the way, there was a real debate as to whether you need 50 or 51. We had that conversation the other day. And everybody from Lawrence Tribe to the other day, Shannon Breen was talking about that. You need 51. So you at least get 1 or 2 Republicans, assuming all the Democrats vote in lockstep.
What if you don't get any Republicans? And can the vice president break the tie? Because
No.
Lawrence Tribe said no.
No. Okay, Kelly, I'll turn to you. You're the lawyer.
That's right now under the Senate rules, they wouldn't be able to do it. But that's if every single Republican, broke quorum and wouldn't allow the vote. And I don't think anybody thinks that's going to happen, but we'll see. Because Lindsey Graham has kind of an approach that I'll vote for Democrats. Democrats should vote for Republicans unless, even if their ideology is not what I agree with, unless the person doesn't have the temperament or the qualifications, the ability. And so he is usually going to be somewhat, supportive of these folks from the other side, which is part of why he was so angry when they did what they did to Justice Kavanaugh, and he's of course, well known for that speech, right? And that's part of where his anger came from.
Yes. Well, again, that's one possibility. Let me, before we move on to some other topics, Kelly, I know you're going to be evaluating this, and we also have posted our third article here by Charlie Cook. Justice Breyer's retirement may not be all bad news for conservatives. And Penna, you've looked at that because he's got a couple of great lines there we might mention. It is our third article that you can read if you would like to actually get into this in a little bit more detail.
Well, Justice Breyer, he was definitely a reliable social liberal, same-sex marriage and abortion rights and all of that. On some other criminal justice issues, he might be a little bit more moderate, I guess. And sometimes he would kind of team up with maybe Kagan and Roberts and, sometimes Kavanaugh. And so there's this other little part of the court that can kind of go different ways on different cases. And so you had Kagan and Breyer, who are a little bit more like that. Then you have Sotomayor, who Charlie Cook calls a bomb thrower, bomb-throwing hack in the mold of Justice Sotomayor. If that's what Biden chooses, which we would not be surprised if he did, then he's going to marginalize the real talent within the living Constitution wing. And perhaps, things would be even more fractured in the court.
Wow.
So you might end up with not the narrow cases that you would end up when you have more compromise going on. You might end up with actually better decisions that advance, the constitutional position on things if you did have a bomb thrower. So, that's just one reason why it may not be bad news that Justice Breyer retired, according to Charlie Cook.
Yeah, obviously, number one, you're essentially you're going to be replacing an old liberal with a young liberal.
Right.
So that's the biggest of what really happens there. How it affects the court, it probably doesn't, except for the sheer personality of the person who's there. We did extensive vetting of all the judges under the Trump administration. We're doing the same thing here, and we will have info on all of the top leading candidates so people could know who are these people. So anybody who goes to firstliberty.org and make sure they're on the Insider, so they get an email every week on what's happening. They'll see as we start on rolling out some of the information on different people. There's some very disturbing stuff. For instance, on Kruger, who's considered one of the top people in a major case at the Supreme Court. She actually was the Solicitor General and made some arguments that were so outrageous against religious freedom that Justice Kagan was appalled.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. So and then she lost 9-0. So stuff like that people need to know about.
Sure. That was a Tabor case, wasn't it?
Yes, Susanna Tabor. So if anybody wants to get it, if they go to firstliberty.org and sign up for the Insider, we'll keep them in as we get closer. But right now they've got to figure out who they're picking. Then they've got to go and sort of meet all the people in the Senate, and then have the hearings and FBI checks and all that stuff.
We may disagree with some of these individuals, but I feel sorry for Stephen Breyer because, first of all, it illustrates again that you can never be liberal enough.
Yeah.
That some of the progressives are upset that he's not liberal enough, which is a lesson I think some of us can learn, and how he was surprised, disappointed, and really blindsided by this. And I feel sorry for what I'm pretty sure is going to be a black woman, because it seems, Penna, as if we're picking her simply because of her race and her gender, and it will always, I think, be perceived as an affirmative action hire or something, like almost like there's an asterisk next to her name.
Yeah, there's no question about it. It's like Joe Biden could have been much more subtle about it. He already promised that. And then if he goes ahead and nominates a black woman, but doesn't say, I'm going to nominate a black woman, and his press secretary and everybody else is saying it, already just kind of laying the groundwork for this person to be marginalized in terms of their qualifications. Oh, well, they're not the best, but they're a black woman. There's one thing about Stephen Breyer that I read today that I sort of admired.
Yes,
I like this because it's in the Wall Street Journal. And he said he likes going out and speaking to college students and high school students. And so, I mean, he's very liberal. He's been wrong. But I do admire people that care about the culture and, that maybe are traditional enough that they at least, they want to steer our young people the right way. And he said that he and his wife paid each of their grandchildren a certain amount of money to memorize the Gettysburg Address, and he had reasons, truths that he wanted them to pick up from doing so. And I thought that is such a good idea. I mean, paying your grandchildren to read founding documents or speeches that teach them. And something that they will then have in their heart and mind to teach them about, what our country is all about, because they're getting an opposite message from the culture in many respects. I thought it was a great idea. I think I'm going to do it.
Yes. And I noticed that when he gave his message, he held up one of these pocket constitutions. Of course, we always say, why can't you read it? But that's another joke.
He carried one up to his announcement.
But I thought it was interesting. And so we'll give credit where credit is due. And if nothing else, it's just one of those cases where even though we may disagree with his policies, he's a likable individual. And I think he's well respected on the court, isn't he?
Absolutely, yeah. And look, when they say moderate, what they really mean is somebody who votes with the liberals every time it matters, but who will vote with the conservatives every, once in a while, if he knows that his vote is not going to decide the case. Yeah. So what you'll find is, a Breyer that votes very seldomly is he the deciding vote with the conservatives. Yeah. It's usually that he's joined. For instance, I think of the Ten Commandments case. Yeah. The Van Orden case out of Texas. He joined, but that just made it 6-3. Yeah. So it would have already been 5-4 if he went to the other side. So that's what you typically see with those who are liberal and considered moderate, is they always vote liberal unless their vote doesn't make the decision. And sometimes they do it strategically. I think they did that in our Bladensburg Cross case. They would have struck it down if they could, but they knew they didn't have the votes. So what they did is they tried to negotiate with Roberts and said, look, we'll come with you if you'll sort of pull back a little bit on your decision. And that's often what they do as well.
Yeah, so you have those concurring decisions that are almost a dissent. Well, let's take a break. When we come back, a couple other articles I've posted, and we mentioned this, but I'd love to get the comments around the table here. We have these leaked videos, and of course, Fox has been really front and center there, but we have quite a number of examples now in which we are recognizing that this has been going on for some time. Lieutenant Governor in the state of Texas said basically it's trafficking people all over the country. So we're going to talk about this clandestine migrant immigration and what that might mean for the future of this country. Also have one that looks at what's going to happen in the elections. And again, you might say, well, we're not going to have a primary anytime soon. Those of us sitting around the table have it coming up real quick. We'll be back right after this.
We live in a digital generation. Point of View is reaching this often overly plugged-in generation with truth. You can keep up with us 24 hours a day using your phone, your tablet, your laptop, or your desktop. Search for the Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, where you can keep up with today's issues, learn about current and upcoming guests by liking us on Facebook. Also, follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @PointOfViewRTS. That stands for Point of View Radio Talk Show. Learn, interact, make a difference with Point of View using new media. And here's one way you can make a big difference. Help us increase our reach by spreading the word among your friends. Share a Facebook post. Tag us in a tweet. With enough joining us to plant seeds, we'll see a tremendous harvest. Come on, it only takes a minute. Search for Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, @PointOfViewRTS on Twitter, and subscribe to the Point of View Radio Talk Show channel on YouTube. Learn, interact, share. The Point of View Radio Talk Show. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Penn Laugh Hour. If you'd like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Want to talk about these leaked video for just a few minutes, and then also get into maybe a little bit on Ukraine and a variety of others. Just also notice I've got all sorts of ink all over my hands when we were working on the printer there just a minute ago, and also about the statewide races taking place. So first of all, Penna, one of the things that a lot of people have been talking about right now have to do with the fact that we have these videos that really document what we've known for some time, and that is that when individuals come to this country, they're not staying in Texas, and there are pictures of them going to the Harlingen airport and being sent all over the country, which means that not only is Texas or California, New Mexico, or Arizona border states, but virtually every state in the Union, almost, at least in the continental United States, is a border state because they're showing up all over the place.
And these people are they're not flying the way we fly, where we have to give our ID and, we buy a ticket and
COVID
all
test
of that, COVID test, none of that. And you just end up there. And now they're putting body cams on people that are greeting these people, and they're finding out where they're from. And I think the worst thing when you just add the numbers and you see that over the last year, 2 million illegal immigrants came over and went into various places all over the country.
Right now, we're at 9,000 a day.
It's changing the composition of our population.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Under Obama, they said that 1,000 a day would be a crisis.
Yeah,
we're at 9,000 a day right now, and it seems to me like what they're doing is illegal.
It sure seems like it.
If
an individual did this would be trafficking,
yes,
right?
Yes.
This would be something, yeah.
And people would be criminally prosecuted. So this is one of those deals where, look, the impeachment stuff with Trump was political, and it was a misuse of the impeachment power. I would never suggest it because it'll never work right now. But this is the kind of thing that I think when the president refuses to do his duty and not accidentally or whatever, he's intentionally. It's one thing to open the border and let people in, which is wrong. You're responsible for controlling the border. That power is given to the president in the Constitution. But it's quite another thing to not only allow the illegality to occur, but then to pick them up and carry them. Now you're participating.
You're affirmatively making it happen.
Yes. And to me, this is the type of thing that is impeachable. You are the president. You are refusing to follow the law, and you are affirmatively encouraging and helping other people to violate the law. Again, I think this will be taken care of through the political process, but it's really damaging what's going on. And look, we need more people in this country. Okay, good people. Let's do it legally. Let's control our borders. Let's get people. We've got people that can't hire people right now, right? But let's get high. there are people who want to come to this country because it's the greatest country on the face of the earth. Let's get the best of the best and bring them here.
Mm-hmm.
Not people who, I know they just showed a report yesterday, a guy who's on the top of the terrorist list that we not only let in the country, even though we knew he was on the terrorist list, but then they let him go, without following him. It's crazy what they're doing right now. It doesn't make any sense, and outside of the fact that there's political constituencies that are demanding it.
And again, you have all these videos that are showing security. And one guy said, we've had more security for a basketball team than we have here. So obviously it's not the case. Someone walking out. And I documented just the other day, I think there were 14 individuals that they found so far that are on the terrorist watch list. And we all know around this table that these are the ones they've seen. These are the ones they've caught. How many others have we missed? So
because they're really trying not to catch them, and they're going into small airports, and they're secret flights is what they really are. Taking people all around the country.
Yeah, there's a story yesterday in the New York Times. I forget the guy's name, but who tracked this guy. He was on the terrorist list, and you thought, well, he must have slipped through. No, our officials knew he was on the terrorist list, and they still didn't do anything. They eventually got in and it was local, they told the local people, okay, this guy's on the terrorist list. The local people let him out. And now I think this was in, I forget what part of the country, but now he's escaped and he's in Michigan last they knew. And so this thing is crazy what's going on right now. And I don't think any Americans, anyone with any sense, is in favor of any of this type of thing. So I think this is a real costly thing at the ballot box. I think this is one of the leading, this and inflation are the two leading issues when people go to vote in November. Why, if something doesn't change, there's going to be a backlash against the Democratic Party that is going to be massive. And so I don't understand why people don't stand up and if you're in the Democratic Party, you stand up and say, hey, this has got to stop.
Yeah.
If you're skeptical, this article that Kerby's put up, it's by Miranda Devine, and she does a great job, I think, in some of these areas where you have to go a little deeper and investigate and telling the story. And it's, it really is a betrayal of the American people. So I would encourage you to go to pointofview.net and read that one. It's in our list of articles.
One of the other ideas that surfaced there is the TSA. Kelly, you travel more than anybody else. And I would imagine there have been some times where in the past you had to take off your shoes, or at least they had to check your bags. These migrants are grabbing bags, getting on planes, and we don't know what's in those bags, and we don't know where they're going. And yet we wouldn't tolerate any of that for legal people getting on an airplane.
No, it's again, it doesn't make any sense. It's like the COVID restrictions, all the stuff that they require of American citizens. So the people who come here illegally are the people who get more freedom, than the citizens. Everything is backwards. So it's something that I think the American people are not in favor of. It's one of those things
they don't want to pay for it either, and they are.
Right. And Donald Trump, it was his leading issue, right? Why? Because Donald Trump has always been about the border? No, because he probably looked and saw that when you do the polling, that the people of this country want our border controlled, and we want the right people coming in and out, and we want to know who's coming in and out. So this is really one of those things that maybe a small, really vocal part of your base wants that ends up costing you dearly.
So again, you mentioned inflation. When before you came here, we were talking about the economy. That's going to be another issue as well, because you can tell people right now that inflation is transitory, but then go to their stores and recognize that's not the case.
Fill up your gas tank, right? I just did it yesterday, and I was like, I told my wife, I was like, wow, I haven't seen this, in a long, long time. And I was just with a friend not too long ago, and I think this tells the real story. He said he watched as this woman and her son stopped to get gas, and he turned to his mom. He said, "Mom, how much? How much can we do?" And she said $20. And that's what changes elections right there. I mean, people, you can say whatever you want, you can spend whatever you want. People know what they're buying at the grocery store. They know what they're putting in their tank. They know that this is not the direction they wanted things to go. They know that the same money they were making last year is not worth the same, and it's causing them situations where they can't even fill up their gas tank.
Yeah. We posted an article the other day by Newt Gingrich, and what he said is go and ask people at the gas pump, ask people at the grocery store. And since some of us are on the table, remember Lee Atwater. Remember Lee Atwater was advising George Herbert Walker Bush, and he said sometimes he would go to a bowling alley and listen to how people would talk. And there is a sense in which, right now we have a real gap between the elitists and average Americans. And I think if some of those elitists would just go to watch what people say at a gas pump, what people say in a grocery store, what people say when they go to a big box store, they'd realize we've got a real problem on our hands, because the average American right now is saying, we know this country is going in the wrong direction, and every poll seems to indicate that.
Absolutely. Again, I think it's one of those things you can't, a lot of things can be spun these days, and the media certainly is. It's sad what's happened to our media. We've kind of lost our media, which is, by the way, one of the reasons I think Point of View is so valuable. There's just very few places you can go get opinions, but you're going to get facts. Anybody who knows Kerby knows you're going to get facts. It's not going to be what somebody thinks about the facts. And it's sad that that we're where we are right now. Really is. But the media can't spin this. I don't care how
It's your life.
one-sided.
It's your daily life.
It doesn't work. I mean, this is one of those things like Jimmy Carter that, it's coming. Absent them, if I was trying to figure this out on the Democratic side, I'd be coming up with some way to deal with this. I'd know these are two huge issues that are going to really smack us in the face in November. And as of this point, I haven't seen very much.
It's not just the inflation, it's that things just don't work as well. Right. You don't get as good a service. You don't get your things on time. You can't get your car fixed until next week, even though it's broken today. All of that. People feel it.
We'll take a break and maybe a few comments around the table about Ukraine and Russia, China, and, of course, the upcoming elections right after this.
Palo Alto, California is a wealthy city of 68,500, south of San Francisco and at the north end of Silicon Valley. It's home to Stanford University, so I guess you could say the city is filled with successful people, high achievers. Parents there are not anxious for their children to return to online classrooms, even as the Omicron variant surges. Neither are their kids, and neither are school officials, although 170 teachers were out sick last week district-wide. When the winter break ended, schools across the nation were faced with decisions regarding what to do as COVID spreads again. The Wall Street Journal reports that Palo Alto School Superintendent Don Austin received an interesting text on a Saturday from his deputy. It read, "What would you think about soliciting parent volunteers to keep us afloat?" Superintendent Austin said it was like a light bulb went off. Mr. Austin sent out a video message to parents comparing Palo Alto to the town of Bedford Falls from the movie It's a Wonderful Life. He told them George Bailey needed the help of the entire community to help him to survive, and they did, epically. Mr. Austin issued a call to action. More than 700 parents across the district's 18 schools responded. They signed up to work shifts as custodians, food service workers, substitute assistants, and COVID testing aides. The jobs they're doing don't require any certificates or background checks. Many of the parents are currently working from home on flexible schedules. Feng Shui is a software engineer at Google who signed up for hour-long shifts wiping lunch tables. He said he liked having his 2 daughters home during the first year of the pandemic, but according to the Journal, he knew it was better for them to be in school. Online learning is a valuable tool, but even parents in this community filled with successful techies are willing to step up to keep their children learning in person. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212, or just sit back and listen to the conversation today from Penna Dexter and Kelly Shackelford. Got my picture here. This is Russia and Ukraine. By the way, I think people begin to realize how huge Ukraine is. I've always said it's a divided country because the eastern part is more kind of Russian. The western part is a little more Slavic. But nevertheless, I love this particular line here. President Biden suddenly cares about borders. Ukraine's borders. And, matter of fact, the other day, Nancy Pelosi said we need to have a vote on the borders. And everybody goes, oh, that's a surprise. Oh, no, he's talking about the Ukrainian borders. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but let me go around the round table, Penna, because if nothing else, this has been in the news, and a lot of people wonder what is going to happen in the future and whether or not when you have 100,000 troops and 1,200 tanks on the border, what's the future? And, of course, there was also a conversation between the president and the Ukrainian president. That never goes well. At least it didn't go very well for Donald Trump. May not have gone very well for Joe Biden. But what about the whole conflict that may unfold right there in Ukraine?
Yeah, I mean, I think Ukraine has moved a little bit more toward Europe than they were in 2014 when the Russians went in and took Crimea. And, a lot of it is about oil. And, of course, there's this pipeline that goes around Ukraine now that we would love to stop so that the oil could have to go through Ukraine, and perhaps that would deter the Russians from going in there. I don't know whether what Biden is doing, I don't know whether he's trying to sort of show himself as a threat or if he's really maybe going to go in there. Don't really know. But it's causing Europe and the U.S. All to have to begin to take action. And it's also showing who our friends are. And, for instance, there's some countries who, were concerned that Germany and other European countries would have enough oil and gas to get through the winter. And we're having to now look for other ways, and perhaps we'll ramp up our production here. But Germany is not acting like they're going to do much. I think they're going to send some supplies to Ukraine, but that's about it.
Helmets, I think 300
helmets.
That's
helmets. It, yeah. And they because they've gone so far into wind and solar, they really need that oil because wind and solar does not get you through the winter.
And so again, and they are probably more interested in keeping the heat on than helping the United States. So it's kind of interesting.
Well, and look, I don't think very many people believe. Let me ask you the question: do you really think this would be happening if Donald Trump was president? I mean, again, he was a little erratic. He's liable to bomb somebody, right? So I mean, that's sort of you can't predict the guy. He's crazy.
Kind of an advantage sometimes.
Yeah, a kind of advantage. I think Biden portrays himself as weak in a lot of different ways. Number one, he's just physically weak. He's mentally weak. People know that. They can read that. And he's the representative of our country. And then if you look at Afghanistan and the horrible situation there and how that was handled, I mean, Putin was former KGB. And so he's going to push as far as he can go. And I think he realizes he can push a lot further with Biden than he could with Trump. And so we're at this horrible situation, but it's very dangerous because, again, what are our, while there's things that are right and wrong, it doesn't mean that we should always, as a country, go and get involved in other people's battles. And so to me, this is not something that we lose blood over in the United States, but it's still a situation that if the national community could all get things done in the right way to stop, it'd be great. But I think a lot of it is just, I don't think Putin believes that we would do anything right now with our current leadership.
And again, I gave a list the other day of what the various NATO countries were providing, and it was a little bit embarrassing. But again, the helmets one is probably the best joke. And again, just before we move on to something else, we have a possibility of a two-front war. I don't want us to go to war at all. But again, Taiwan, I mean, next week, of course, is the Chinese Olympics. These are the U.S. International Olympics in Beijing. But the reality is that we've asked some people whether or not they even want to watch the Olympics. But if China eventually moves against Taiwan and Russia moves against Ukraine, I don't think we could handle that, even if we had Donald Trump still in office or anybody else in office. I mean, there is a sense in which you have to start evaluating what you can do to project force in various parts of the world. And a two-front conflict would be something we could not right now as a country handle, I don't think.
The other thing that's happened is China has gone in and made deals and friends with a lot of different countries. For instance, Iran and also Russia. So these countries that are, we're trying to be deterring their actions and be strong against them and prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, they're making choices between whether they're going to do what the United States wants or whether they're going to do what China wants. So China has inserted itself in so many international relationships now that it's a whole different political and international situation for the United States. And, I don't know that our administration is up to the task of dealing with that.
That's where we are. Well, one other one I just thought I'd mention real quickly, and that is our last article, and that is if you look at some of these races, we've looked at the congressional races, and of course you've had reapportionment and all the rest, but then you look at some of these statewide races, it looks a lot better for the Republicans than the Democrats. But back to the key issue, if all of a sudden you have a situation in which the Supreme Court, for example, rules against Roe versus Wade, then who your governor is, who your legislature is going to matter in terms of some of these pro-life issues. As I've said before, most people probably could not tell you who their county judge was, and then we have the pandemic and the lockdowns. Some people probably couldn't tell you who their district attorney was, and then they start seeing that we have record crime rates in some of these areas. And more recently, a lot of people couldn't tell you who's on their city council or even on their school boards, and then they start looking at all the things with critical race theory. So I think this is, Kelly, a good time to pay attention to some of these elections that are going to be taking place over the next couple of weeks.
Absolutely. This is a big election that's occurring starting now through November all over the country. And I'll tell you, one of the things I've been really encouraged by, just my own experience at First Liberty, is we've had a lot of new people who have never, given money or been a part of us that are coming out of the woodworks. And because I'm calling these people and I'm like, hey, thank you. Who are you? And one by one, it's so encouraging to hear what they're saying. They're like, you know what? I've been watching. I've been with you guys. They're the kind of people that listen to Point of View, but I've never really gotten involved. And my wife and I talked, and we said, it's time. And I'm hearing that a lot. Like our increase of new people has tripled from a year ago.
Wow.
And it's because I think sort of people are coming together that care about the country. And so I would encourage them to do that, number one, with Point of View. I mean, the only way that you're going to get a lot of the information you get on Point of View is Point of View. Nobody else does what Point of View does. And so if you just listen and listen and listen and you're never involved, I'd encourage you to be involved. They have a way you can give every month, or they have, you can go to pointofview.net and do that. But get behind some of these things you care about. And obviously, if you're a religious liberty person, firstliberty.org. But I am encouraged. I do see something happening, and I think people are rising up. They love the country. They don't like what's being attempted, and they want to pass down the greatness of this country to our children and grandchildren. And they very well might pull that off if enough people get involved.
Well, again, to thank both of you for being here. It always is great when we have the two of you, and wish we had more time, but we are out of time before we're out of topics. So let me just encourage you to have a great weekend. I want to thank Andrew and Steve for their help behind the scenes. We look forward to seeing you right here on Monday on Point of View.
Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas recently said, "The Declaration of Independence has weathered every storm for 245 years. It birthed a great nation. It abolished the sin of slavery, and it endeavored to address its effects. While we have failed the Declaration time and again, and the ideals of the Declaration time and again, I know of no time," said Thomas, "when the ideals have failed us." While some see our founding as fatally flawed and promote ideas that have failed every time they've been tried, at Point of View, like Justice Thomas, we still believe in America's ideals. And if you do too, make a difference today. Join the Truth Team as we promote the unchanging truth that gave us liberty and prosperity. Visit pointofview.net/team or call 1-800-347-5151. The original Americans responded to the call. Will you? Pointofview.net/team and 1-800-347-5151. 5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.